One of my closest friends, Rav Jake Lansky, told me that he read an op-ed recently where Frank walked into his boss's office in a cutting-edge company and handed in his papers of resignation. The boss was stunned. He said, "Frank, what's going on? You're just about at the heights of your profession. You're making more money than anybody could imagine, and there's more ahead. Why would you quit now? What's going on? You're not old. Are you burned out? What's happening?" And Frank said that when he looked out his front window across the street at the neighbor's lot, and the first thought that popped into his mind was, how could it be that John is making $4 million more than I am, so that I knew that it was time to quit? Because with the salary that I have of the tens of millions, I don't need anything. I'm not lacking not one thing in the whole world. And yet that's the first thought that comes to my mind, is that the guy across the street is making more than me. If I was lacking, if I wasn't making so much money, and I dreamed of having a profession where I had a higher salary, so okay, that makes sense. But when I don't need anything, and the first thought that pops into my mind is how I see myself in the view of somebody else, it's time to go. My priorities are messed up. I need to reshift my values and to refocus. This explains a very interesting, almost seeming contradiction that happens in this week's Parshat, Parshas Bereshit, as we start the new year and as we start the new cycle of Torah reading. When Hashem plants the Garden of Eden, so the Torah tells us that B'toch Hagan, in the middle of the garden, is a tree called the Eitz HaChaim. Then there's also a tree of knowledge, an Eitz HaDas, that's somewhere within the garden. But the B'toch, the one in the middle, that's the Eitz HaChaim. However, when Chava is talking to the snake about which tree and which fruit they're allowed to eat, so Chava says it's the Eitz HaDas, the forbidden one. That's the one that's B'toch Hagan. How could that be? What's happening? It seems clear from the layout that God had of the Garden of Eden that it was not the tree of knowledge that was in the middle. But it teaches us a lesson in human nature that many times we can have it all. But when there's one thing that's forbidden, when there's one thing that we can't have, so sometimes we become hyper-focused, we become obsessed with what we can't have. Of course, this is what happened in the story of Purim. Haman had the whole world bowing down to him. 127 countries were the people. 127 countries were the people were bowing down to him. However, he says, Einenu shaveli. None of that's worth it to me, because Mordechai the Jew is not bowing down. Can you imagine an entire planet of people respecting and honoring and bowing down to Haman? And he can't get past the fact that there's one person that's not bowing down, and in fact, that causes his downfall ultimately. And that's perhaps why the Gemara explains, Haman min HaTorah minayin. How do we know? Where's there a reference to Haman in the Torah? And the Gemara answers from the pasuk in this week's Parsha, Hamin ha'etz. After Adam and Chava eat from the Eitz HaDas, Hashem says, Hamin ha'etz. Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from? And the word Hamin has the same letters as Haman. So we see that there's a reference to Haman. That's what the Gemara is saying? Same letters, Hey Mem Nun, Hamin and Haman. So that's an indication that there's Haman from the Torah? Of course not. However, when we realize that Haman's downfall and Adam's downfall was caused by the same human nature flaw, so then it makes sense that the Gemara uses this as the source, as a reference to Haman. Haman had the whole world bowing down to him, but he couldn't have one thing, and it all came crashing down. Adam had the whole entire Gan Eden. He had the entire paradise, but he lost paradise because he became obsessed. Chava became obsessed with the one thing that she couldn't have. It was B'toch Hagan. It became the central focus of her life, of the way she viewed her worth and her value and her priorities. It was the one thing that she couldn't have. That's where she got stuck. You heard some of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us appreciate the incredible brachos that we do have, and to realize, yes, we don't have everything, but the things that we don't have are not designated for us. Hashem has a different plan for us, and we have amazing brachos within ourselves and within our families and within our communities. Hashem should help us open up our eyes and be able to appreciate all the amazing bracha that we do have. Have a great Shabbos.